Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our full council today, Thursday, the 3rd of October. This council is an extra council to our normal schedule in view of the large amount of agenda items, which would have been too much for us to deal with in the proper manner at the last meeting, or indeed for our main October meeting in the coming weeks. So that's the reason for today's extra meeting. Item 1 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? Councillor Peacock?
The report on transport mentions Islands Partnership, which I'm the director of. I am also obviously a transport provider.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger?
Same as Councillor Peacock, reference Islands Partnership and Transport Links. I'm a director and executive vice chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Chairman's announcements. The only announcement I have to make is to welcome Leah, our new monitoring officer. This is the first time she's attended full council in that role, and we welcome you very much to the Isles of Scilly, Leah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's lovely to be here.
Item 3 on our agenda, urgent items. I have none. So we move straight into part 1, item 4 on our agenda, which is our today's planning application for the ex-secondary school site at Carn Thomas, which is in the hands of Stella. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to draw members' attention to a late representation which was received from Councillor Tobin Duggan, expressing disappointment in the lack of consideration of water management, specifically the lack of any grey water harvesting system. He feels that failing to require this is a missed opportunity and oversight and denial of the climate change challenge. He has requested that water recycling be discussed and considered, and whether a condition to secure the installation of a grey water recycling system could be proposed. The developer has responded by saying the site's constrained topography and limited available space would require storage tanks to be installed at deep foundation depths. This would jeopardise the viability of what they describe as an already very expensive residential development. They say that they have past experience of delivering grey water harvesting schemes on the mainland. These incur significant maintenance costs that are passed on to residents in the form of service charges. They also say that not all tenants like using grey water recycling, and it often gets switched off. Officers agree that a number of opportunities have been missed in the proposals, including the treatment of surface water, which is being piped straight to sea. However, although policy SS2 does require development to contribute to the island's sustainability by incorporating effective water management measures, sustainable urban drainage systems, green roofs and water-saving devices, including grey water collecting, it does not require all development to provide all of these measures. In this case, there are 2 small green roofs, areas of permeable surfacing and some water butts, generally calculated to provide a saving of around 5 litres per person per day. And the 110 litres per person per day water consumption accords with the requirements of policy SS6. The development deals adequately with surface water in so much as it will prevent flood risk. The lack of grey water recycling and other forms of on-site compatible attenuation, which could have provided a number of multifunctional benefits, is not considered to be so harmful as to warrant a reason for refusal. If members felt strongly, Condition 16 could be amended to include a grey water harvesting system where feasible. However, in reality, the developer is unlikely to agree to installing it for the reasons given. Turning to the proposal, this application falls to full council for determination as it falls within the category of major development. Permission is sought to construct 27 100% affordable dwellings. There would be 12 one-bed, 10 two-bed and 5 three-bedroom houses, which would be owned and managed by the developer Live West. The units would be of a social rental tenure and would meet an identified local housing need. In principle, support for around 26 dwellings on the site is provided by allocation policy LC6 number H1. Following a number of concerns raised by officers and consultees, the application was amended with revised plans and amended design, drainage, access and refuse strategy information. The development includes three-storey terrace blocks along Telegraph Road, which will be prominent in some views. The scheme will not enhance the landscape, seascape and scenic beauty of this part of the AONB Conservation Area and Heritage Coast. However, it will broadly conserve it. All units would meet national space standards and a third of them would meet M42 accessibility requirements, which means they can be converted to wheelchair use. However, not all the units have access to private outside space, including Unit 10, which is also single aspect. Occupants of flats on the upper ground and first floors will instead have access to a shared amenity space to the south, which is reached by a steep path with 52 steps. The lack of accessible amenity space is unfortunate. However, the site is constrained by its topography, and the allocation necessarily requires the development to be of a very high density, with most of the site being taken up with built form. The development will utilise modern methods of construction in the form of off-site fabricated modules, which are energy efficient. Air source heat pumps and PV panels will provide on-site renewable energy sources. The development will not result in flood risk, with surface water discharged straight to the sea via the existing storm drain that served the secondary school. Some water will also be stored on site in rainwater butts and 2 small areas of green roof. Final details of sustainable drainage, which include the construction of a second off-site gully and their ongoing management, are secured by conditions 13 and 14. The proposal includes a minimal number of parking spaces. As the site is within walking and cycling distance of local facilities, the lack of on-site parking is acceptable, providing measures are secured to encourage walking and cycling and avoid dangerous on-street parking on Telegraph Road. The application now includes an acceptable amount of cycle storage, and a travel plan to encourage sustainable travel can be secured by condition 20. Unfortunately, the developer is unable to agree to contribute to the upgrade of the dump path, which is identified as poor in the Council's local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, to improve the safety of children walking to school. The proposal is acceptable in terms of ecology, archaeology and neighbouring amenities, subject to conditions, and the waste and recycling team are now broadly satisfied with the accessibility of the refuse storage arrangements. A refuse management plan dealing how waste will be managed operationally is secured by condition 15. The proposal also acceptably deals with statutory biodiversity net gain by means of on-site provision, and details of how this will be managed and monitored is secured by conditions 22 to 25. However, the developer is unable to cover the Council's associated costs to cover over the 30-year monitoring period, which are estimated to be in the region of about £35,000. There are a number of shortfalls within the submission, most notably the limited amenity provision and the inability to improve the poor pedestrian and cycle link to school as a result of the development. However, there may be other funding routes that would allow the Council to secure improvements to the dump path before the development is occupied. Whilst monitoring of the statutory biodiversity net gain habitat will still need to be carried out over the 30-year period, the Council may be able to absorb the associated ecology costs. The financial implications to the Council are set out at paragraphs 93 to 96 of the Officer's report. The Section 151 Officer has confirmed that these costs will be absorbed by the General Fund due to Live West delivering the development as an exceptional site for the Council and the declared housing crisis. In summary, when balanced against the public benefit that will be derived from the delivery of the housing and providing the Council is accepting of the financial implications, these shortfalls are not considered so harmful as to warrant a reason for refusal. The proposal is therefore considered, on balance, to be acceptable. It is therefore recommended that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out as Appendix A and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement within 6 months of the date of this Council meeting between the Council and the applicant to secure 27 affordable local occupancy homes of a social rental tenure to include 12 one-bed flats 10 two-bed flats and 5 three-bedroom houses. And also that members delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the lead member for planning and regulatory services to agree to the heads of terms for Section 106, to agree an extension of a 6-month time period referred to in Recommendation 1 if required, and to make any other necessary changes to the conditions set out in Appendix A. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stella. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, thank you, Stella. Really good report. Thank you for working through this. It's really good to see this actually being presented to council and this hurdle being presented to council that hopefully we can overcome through this meeting. Firstly, the positives. Yeah, 27 new dwellings looks, which is sorely needed on the islands. It's good to see officers holding the developer to account about certain aspects of the local plan and about how the issue of viability is holding certain things that maybe on the mainland the developer would have to do, but here on the islands seem to be too expensive. For instance, the contribution to a cycle path of £10,000 and Councillor Dugan's idea of grey water recycling, which is more than £10,000. There's only 4 other representations from the public, which kind of says something about how the public supports this, I think. The only question that I had about one of the things that jumped out to me rather was the name, the representation we told Toppins about the name of the site is Downderry rather than Carn Thomas. So it'd be good to make sure that that's preserved rather than lost. And are officers happy that the representations from our statutory consultees have been answered sufficiently? Lisa or Stella?
I can confirm that the responses we had from statutory consultees confirmed they were satisfied with the matters that they had raised, that they had been addressed.
Okay. There's one question from South West Water about highways drainage. Are we happy as a local authority that the increased concrete in the site and how that flows on the road, is that going to cause a problem at all, or are we happy with the storm drains that already exist to be able to cope with that?
Shall I take this one? So final details of surface water drainage are still required, mostly because it will require the construction of a second gully. The initial drainage information wasn't informed by a survey, and actually it was our own council officers who pointed out that actually it was different to what the developer had actually proposed. That survey is now being carried out, and it has the information that they provided to date has been reviewed by our sustainable drainage consultant, who is satisfied in principle with what they're proposing, but the final details obviously need to still be provided in terms of especially providing the second gully. The condition itself, which requires the details of sustainable drainage, it's actually the condition 13. They're worded in a way, it's called a Grampian condition, really. It just means that the off-site works also just need to be completed prior to occupation, I think it is. But because they're off-site, it's important that they get carried out, and it will need agreement by the relevant landowners.
Okay. Thank you, Stella. I'm going to throw it open to anyone else now.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
It's just an observation that the most number of occupancies here, or buildings, or we would say, is for 1-bedroom properties, which surprised me because I thought maybe 2 bedrooms. And I just want to clarify that we have the relevant research that clarifies why such a large number of 1-bedroom properties. I was asked by a resident to raise that issue.
My understanding is that that's the demand that's most in need from the council house waiting list is 1-bedroom accommodation. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, I welcome all the work that's gone into putting this application together. It's been many years since the site was flattened, so it's positive to see some progress today. I really recognise the social value the site and development brings, and the community sustainability in terms of a long-term housing situation. I find the design a bit underwhelming, if I'm being honest. It's almost drab in some respect. I'd like to see a bit more creativity, imagination, better use of materials, more to enhance the hill. It strikes me as it's been value engineered down to fit a budget. I'm reassured by the drainage comments. The point about density has been touched upon again. It seems, and from what I've heard, to make the site stack up in terms of affordability and viability from the developer, we need to get as much in as we possibly can, which comes with the expense of a bit of outside amenities. But I think probably my main concern is the issue around parking, the additional cars which are likely to be in that site. I recognise the desire to have more walking and cycling, which is great, but I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we aren't expecting to see more than the 9 vehicles which the parking spaces are allowing for. So I'm just concerned going forward how the two sides of the road on a very busy route going to school and for other purposes could become very much congested. Sightlines could be lost. So anything which we could be proactive around to try and mitigate some of those challenges, which I'm sure will come, would be beneficial. But of course, I do welcome the investment and I will be supporting the application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you. Brilliant, actually. It will be 10 years, won't it, from the site being demolished from school that I attended. So it's really good. I think it's really positive, especially in view that ENA is not going to go forward. So we're going to be losing those potential houses to the local need. There is just one thing. I was the one that kicked off a wee bit about a lack of strategy with the council regarding adaptive housing. If you recall, I had great concerns that when the plans for the new care home were being built, that the big jigsaw piece that was missing was homes for people that, when they get older, they need some sort of adaptive changes in their home. And I'm really pleased to see that 10 of these are 1-bedroom places, and that 9 of them, is it 9 are going to be adaptive or possible for when people have mobility problems? So for me, that's a really win-win.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Yes, thank you. I welcome the application 100%, but I'll pick up on Councillor Williams' comments referring parking, traffic. It's bad enough in that area at the moment when the summer season is on and the sailing school is working well and the restaurant, etc. There's lots of dangerous situations down that road. This can only add to it. And I would urge, we've got a couple of years, I assume, before this comes to fruition, that we look seriously at outside the box for how we can provide some parking solutions in that area, potentially on the road towards the recycling centre, potentially on the industrial estate, even if it's small pockets of 4 or 5 places here and there, whatever, that's dedicated car parking, and even with permits that they are parking spots for residents of this development only, because if it's left as it is, it'll just add to what we already know is an extremely difficult situation with cars and parking, and I think we've got a little bit of time to think a lot deeper into that situation before this is actually finally built. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to Councillor Tobin Dugan's comments about the water storage opportunity. That site is not suitable at all. I mean, I worked with Councillor Anita Bedford's father on blowing up bits of granite at the back of the school in 1966. So I can vouch for how difficult site it was. So underground storage things would be extremely difficult. and I think it's been reasonably covered within this report, and I would certainly support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Legg, please.
I would agree with the comments that have been made regarding water sort of storage, that it's disappointing that more hasn't been done, although I understand it has been considered. Water is such a valuable resource on any island, let alone our island, where relatively small as islands go. With regards to parking, obviously if you were to have more parking, you would have less housing. And I think less parking is probably preferable, but that encourages walking and cycling. So it's a shame that there isn't more support for local walking and cycling projects. This is, of course, an important project for the island, and on balance, I think it meets the requirements. So I don't know if it's been proposed yet. I'm happy to propose this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Legg. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you. I just would like to comment from the chair. I hear about views about parking, which I understand. But I've said this before, and as you all know, we have an untenable situation here on St Mary's with our cars. You know, we're all guilty, but we have to solve this problem, and it's not just going to be around parking at this site. As you all know, we've got an untenable situation in Hewtown and elsewhere, and we have to address this urgently. And I can assure you, I'm talking to the Chief Executive at the moment, and I'm sure all of you will back me in the fact that this council has to address cars on St Mary's in particular as a really urgent item, because it's now a ridiculous situation, not least for what Councillor Legg is mentioning around our environmental impact, but it's just got completely out of hand. So we will be addressing that as soon as we possibly can in a meaningful way. Thank you. And I have a proposer and seconder for this application. All those in favour, please. It's passed unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stella, and thank you very much, Lisa, for your input. Item 5 on our agenda is the External Auditor's Annual Report, and I'm pleased to welcome David Bray and I think I've possibly got your name not pronounced properly, but welcome both of you. I know our Chief Executive, Russell Ashman's going to introduce the paper, and then we'll be handing over to you. So welcome and thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report we're bringing you today, members, is the External Auditor's Annual Report. This is an interim report by the External Auditors due to the fact that a chunk of the work that usually feeds into this report is yet to commence, which is the audit of the Council's financial statements for 2023-24. That work is due to start in October, and has been delayed due to the national issue regarding audit capacity around the country. I would just like to point out that the Council produced its accounts and submitted them by the 31st of May deadline. So it isn't an issue with the Council not fulfilling its statutory duties. It's the issue of a national problem with external audit capacity, and it's impacting every council around the country. But moving on, as I say, it's an interim report. So what normally happens is that the statement of accounts are audited, the value and then that's followed by a sort of, or in parallel, the value for money report activity is done. That's all pulled together at the end with this annual report. As I say, although the external audit of the financial statements has been delayed, the value for money work has not, and that's been carried out over the summer months. and it was felt that it would be right to actually report the outcomes of that activity to members in an interim report, which is what is set out in front of you today. In terms of what that report is saying, I think from my position, there is no surprises in there. It is more or less what we would expect. That doesn't mean to say there isn't slight disappointment where we are. Any report that has a red rating against a heading is not good for the council. But let's sort of take a step back and say that a significant part of both the ambers and the reds in this report are due down to the issue that we have around our children's services and the Ofsted inspection that happened 14, 15 months ago, which deemed that our children's services were inadequate. Therefore, it's not surprising that when the external auditors do their review, that they don't take that into account, and how could they actually say that all your arrangements are green and okay when they know that there is a Ofsted report that says children's services is inadequate. So it's not surprising it's red. It's expected it was red. It's disappointing because it's another impact of that position that we have with children's services. In addition, the amount of investment required to pull us out of that position is also figured in some of the other work that they've identified. The use of reserves and whether we are now drawing too much on our reserves without an adequate plan to stop that reliance on reserves. So, as I say, a lot of it is relating to the children's services. I think the other point before I hand over is that due to the delay in work by our external auditors, the value for money work last year was only done some 5 months, was done, reported to full council in March this year. This work now was carried out during the summer, July and August. So there's only a period of 4 or 5 months since their last report. Therefore, it's not surprising that some of the recommendations that they picked up in March repeated. What I would like to say is that I think it's pleasing to say that they are all in progress. So we have started on the activity. It's, as I say, it's unlikely that they would be completed in 4 or 5 months. If this had been a report on the normal cycle, i.e. 12 months in between, then it would have been very disappointing that we had picked up the recommendations from a previous report. But as I say, the fact that it's only 4 months ago since the last report when this piece of work was done, that's not a surprise. I will hand over to David and She to take us through their findings from their perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, as always, for enabling us to speak with you today. I'll just give a little brief introduction in terms of the context, picking up on some of the points that Russell helpfully covered in his introduction. We'll then hand you over to Chi, who did the work, and we'd be more than happy, Chair, with your permission, to take any questions either on this report or indeed on the wider external audit situation at the moment. As Russell said earlier, that there is a national pressure on audit delivery. I think that the latest statistics is that there's across the country, and it's not a Grant Thornton issue, it's a national issue. There's probably 1,000 outstanding audit opinions at the moment. So it's not a situation that anyone thinks is acceptable. And as Russell said, audit capacity is a factor in that, but it's not the only factor in a complex situation. The government is introducing what's called calling it the backstop arrangements, which is basically drawing a line in the sand. So any audits that aren't complete by a certain date will be effectively abandoned, for want of a better word. The auditors will issue a disclaimer of opinion on those financial statements and will bring the audit to a close. That sounds like a silver bullet, but in reality it's not a position that anyone wants to be in because of the difficulties in getting assurance over future audits. So as far as the Council of the Isles of Scilly is concerned, the The immediate backstop date is the 13th, bizarre date, it's the 13th of December this year for 22-23 audits, and members will be aware that we signed off the 22-23 audit for the Council of the Isles of Scilly in December of last year, so almost a year ahead of that backstop date. The next one, as far as we're concerned, is the 28th of February 2025, and that's the backstop date for 23-24 audits, which, as Russell said, is the audit that will be starting shortly. Our aim is to complete that and report that back to full council in December of this year. So again, that will be 2 to 3 months ahead of the revised deadline. And then finally, Chair, with your permission, as Russell said, the Auditor's annual report that covers the value for money side of our work was reported earlier this year. We appreciate that was later than was ideal. And reporting to you now is part of our strategy to bring forward audit reporting so that we're coming to full council in a timely manner, rather than in some cases almost a year after the event. So that's where we are from a delivery perspective. And just finally, in terms of value for money work, I think that the term value for money probably means all things to all people, and we'd all have our own understanding and definition about what that actually meant in a local authority context and how auditors would go about undertaking that work. Helpfully, the National Audit Office has given some guidance to auditors, and they've split value for money into 3 distinct areas. One is looking at financial sustainability. So again, it's very much a forward-looking assessment as far as auditors are concerned. One looks at governance, and one looks at your arrangements in place for achieving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And you'll appreciate that those 3 areas aren't mutually exclusive, and there's an overlap between the 2. Auditors are required to comment and assess local authorities' arrangements in those areas, and it's quite common for auditors to be assessing local authorities as green or amber in those areas, whilst the organisation itself does have significant challenges, and the rating of green or amber doesn't mean that the organisation doesn't face those challenges. What it means is that the auditor is confident that the organisation has adequate arrangements in place to deal with those challenges. So it's not an assessment as to the status of the organisation, it's a commentary on your arrangements to deal with the challenges you face. So hopefully that's some helpful context for you. So I'll hand you over to Chi now, Chair. We'll talk you through the report, and like I said, we'll be happy to take any questions either on this report or on the wider concerns that members may have regarding external audit. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Chi. Thanks, David. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Chi is fine by me if you call me Chi. So for the report, essentially, like Russell said, it's not too different from what we presented last year, even though the timing was short. So if you look at the key recommendation that we made, the red rating on improving economy, effectiveness and efficiency, we retained last year's recommendation. So it's more or less because we understand that the improvement actions will take some time to be implemented. And so we didn't change too much of the recommendation that we made last year. And regarding the amber ratings that we made, it's also like a follow-up of prior year recommendations. So we reckon that by the time you're working on these recommendations, you would also be resolving the recommendations that we made in 22-23, which is more or less killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's, in general, the summary of the report. If you have any specific questions, we'll be happy to take them now.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Grottek.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our external auditors for their report and recommendations. As an interim report to the 31st of March 2024, and as the Chief Executive has just noted, many of these recommendations are a work in progress. As the Chief Executive and 151 Officer has noted in his usual clear analysis at the introduction to the agenda item, there are no surprises. However, I would like to assure the external auditors that members accept and remain committed to their role as custodians of public finance and remain aware that ensuring value for money is an important and key consideration. As we all know, improvement work in children's services has gathered pace since June 2024, and I do believe we're making good progress. Work is also continuing into the review of council policies and protocols that we started some time ago, and also we are looking at our arrangements for outside support, which is so necessary as the smallest authority in the UK with the largest remit of responsibilities. Our 151 officer also is working with members regarding the reserves position that is noted in the report. So to finish, our unique geographical location and limited resources, human and financial, reinforces continuing work to achieve a fair funding settlement. Officers and members look forward to working with the new government to progress their agenda and discuss ongoing support. We will be mindful of this audit report as we work on our current budget setting programme. Thank you. Thank you again for all your work in this area.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you. Very good report. I've just got a couple of questions, please, if you don't mind. Is there a benchmark for other local authorities? Are we doing good? Seeing amber and green is good. Red, only one red. Is there a benchmark that local authorities should be working to?
It's a really good question. Just picking on the really helpful summary that we had prior to that, we are obviously mindful of the size and the resource constraints and the unique nature of the Council of the Isles of Scilly when formulating our audit approach and also in the report. So any recommendations that we make are mindful of the size and the capacity of the council. In terms of a benchmark position, I suppose, without stating the obvious, the ideal scenario would be to be green across the board. I think if you look at the national picture, that's probably the exact opposite in that there's very much a sea of red as far as we're concerned. So in terms of the Council of the Isles of Scilly, the red rating on the 3 E's, economy, efficiency and effectiveness, is purely linked to the Ofsted assessment, and that there's no getting away from that really. But if you take a step back from that, then the arrangements in the other areas are reasonable on a lot of any cause for concern. I think just in terms of whether or not you want to aim for green and implement the recommendations, then there's inevitably got to be a trade-off as far as members and officers are concerned between implementing recommendations and the resources required to do that. And there's always going to be an element of trade-off in a local authority of your size.
Thank you. The other thing I was interested in, governance is of a particular interest to me, and it came up with the policies that was amber. When I became councillor in 2021, I did go through all the council policies. There's over 50. Most of them in 2001 were well out of date, which is unacceptable for a local authority. And I've been sort of nagging about it ever since. I know Russell has taken up that, and hopefully the policies will be updated. And I think it really came very obvious to all of us that our post-16 transport policy was non-existent in a format that could be acceptable. And I think really it highlights for me how important any organisation are with their policies. I think that was probably my greatest concern. I've got a lot of ticks here, so I must be quite happy. Agency staff, yes, that is concern. I think members have got real worries about that. I think everything else, unlike me, I had a load of ticks. So thank you very much.
No, that's helpful. And just in terms of policies, I mean, some policies will probably be unchanged from one edition to the next edition. So you can imagine some policies, literally it's just a case of ensuring that it reflects current situations, whereas perhaps other policies that the council may have, it might be a rapidly changing environment in which you're operating, in which case a refresh of those policies might be appropriate. So again, it's focusing on the key areas. So if you think of perhaps, say, cyber security, for example, which is probably the number one threat for most businesses and local authorities in the country, having an up-to-date approach and policy as far as cyber security is concerned is probably really important, whereas perhaps some of the other areas, it might just be a case of refreshing or just reviewing what you've currently got in place. So again, it's taking a pragmatic and proportionate response to those.
I take your point, but in my previous role as an RCN, I had a role in the RCN. The first thing we always looked at when there were any issues, regardless, had that organisation got up-to-date policies. And I think these have to be taken very seriously, not just sort of reviewed, but taken very seriously, because they safeguard people and they safeguard organisations.
So yeah, that's a point well made. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, it's good to see this was picked up by the Governance Committee a couple of meetings ago, I think. Simon did the then monitoring officer produced a review of policies, so it's good to see that work is continuing and being picked up by audit, and look forward to the results of that coming to governance. We'll look at it later.
Thank you very much. Do we have a proposer for the recommendations, please? Councillor Grottick, and the seconder, Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed again to Chi and to David, and of course to Russell for this report. Thank you.
Okay, if I can just, with your permission, Chair, just give members an update on to the next stages of this. I'll take 30 seconds of your time. So, as Russell said at the start, this is an interim report. It's only interim because we haven't completed the financial statement section. So we do an audit findings report on the accounts audit with a little bit of VFM, and then we do the value for money report with a little bit of account. So there's an overlap between the two. So the report will stay as it is, other than the fact that we'll add in a commentary on the financial statements audit, and that's what's required to transfer it from an interim report to a final report, and we'll share both of those with full council in December. And as always, Chair, thank you very much for your engagement and for the helpful questions and commentary from members on our work. It's really helpful and appreciated, so thank you very much.
Thank you. We move on now to item 6 on our agenda, which is the Aldersley transport links, in the hands of Nigel Blackler, our Director of Major Projects. Thank you, Nigel.
Chair, am I able to just come in? Because two members have declared an interest in this item. I'm just wondering if they're going to be absenting or...
Well, I'm happy for them to stay in the room and listen to the paper, but obviously they won't be...
participating?
No, in the vote. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock?
Are you happy for me to comment or not make any comments, but not vote?
So ordinarily, if you're declaring an interest, you wouldn't participate in the debate and you wouldn't participate in the vote, and you would normally absent yourself. It is a matter for the chair if he is going to allow you to stay in for a portion and to make comment, but then you would normally absent yourself before the vote takes place, and that is in accordance with your standing order and the code of conduct.
Yeah, I think John's involvement, Councillor Peacock's involvement, is mainly in off-island boating, so therefore I would be happy for him to comment on anything else, and to leave that item if that's satisfactory with you. Thank you. Okay, so Nigel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members, and thanks for the opportunity to present this report to you today. The report before you has 3 recommendations. The first is in response to the request from members for an outline project plan to be brought to full council for approval. So recommendation 1 seeks your approval for an outline project plan which sets out the further work proposed on transport, and that this be submitted to the government for formal approval. The plan reflects the new role of the council following the withdrawal of Levelling Up funding and proposes that work focuses on 4 principal areas. And those are, the first is contingency planning, and that the council continue to work with the Devon, Cornwall and Aldersley Local Resilience Forum to prepare plans setting out the multi-agency response to any significant service interruptions or withdrawal of passenger or freight services and provided by the commercial operators to ensure essential transport links are maintained to the Isles of Scilly. The second area of work focuses on the Council continuing to work with the transport operators, port and airport authorities to create a monitoring framework which can be used to identify the improvements required to provide resilient, reliable and affordable transport links for the Isles. The third area of work focuses on the Council commissioning an independent review of the current costs of operating St Mary's Airport and to assess the options available to the Council to remove the need to continue to subsidise the operation of the airport in the future. And the fourth area of work proposes that the Council continue to work with the Department for Transport and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on the development of a plan for an integrated approach to providing resilient, reliable and affordable transport system which meets the needs of the community, businesses and visitors to the Isles of Scilly in the future. And for the avoidance of any doubt, just to advise members that this also includes travel between all the islands and not just between the mainland and St Mary's. A full copy of the outline project plan is attached to your report today at Appendix A. The second recommendation is seeking approval from members for the proposed schedule of reports to full council to support the delivery of the outline project plan. During the debate at full council in April, members highlighted the need to ensure that all members and stakeholders are kept fully informed as the work progresses and key decisions are taken. The outline plan has been developed around the scheduled meeting dates for full council and the need to provide both the Department for Transport and the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government with quarterly and annual reports during the period to April 2026 when this work is due to be completed. A copy of the reporting schedule is attached for you today at Appendix B. The third recommendation asks members to note the lessons learned from the work on the Sea Links Levelling Up project and approve the approach proposed in the report in respect of any further negotiations or bids to government to secure additional funding to deliver transport improvements. This recommendation takes into account the unique set of circumstances which led to the Council being allocated £48.4 million of levelling up funding and the review of the overall programme by the Public Accounts Committee, which was reported in March 2024. I hope that's helpful in just summarising the recommendations that you have in this report in front of you today, members, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Councillor Sims, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your report, Nigel. I think still with the lessons learned from this, Nigel's made quite a lot of emphasis on red lines, and I think when we initially went into this was going back to 2019, 2018, we were talking about it, it was very collegiate, everybody was working together really well, and then Love turned up, and now in retrospect it looks like Johnson was having breakfast with his dog Dylan, they discussed it, and it was policy at lunchtime. It seemed fairly ill thought out, and the initial thing was quite optimistic, very enthusiastic, and then the departments that had to deal with it moved in and it all got rather complicated. But there were no real red lines from anybody at that point. The red lines emerged later. The council obviously had its own red lines on this, but they were nowhere near as inflexible as the government's or the steamship company. And so the reason it failed basically was because the government and the operator involved couldn't bridge the gap between what they both wanted. And that's why, as Nigel pointed out, and certainly pointed out in the report, that we have to get this square before we enter anything else in a similar nature. I don't think we'll get anything exactly the same as this again, but obviously something has to be done with transport later on. And I completely agree with an independent report on the airport. I personally don't think that an independent report on the airport will find many savings we can make. If it does, great. But we do need an independent report to actually present to government or whoever that this is what it is, this is what we're dealing with, and either the council continues to subsidise it, which is becoming increasingly untenable, or we need additional funding from elsewhere. And I know there has been some discussion amongst members, emails going back and forth regarding an independent assessment of the LUC process. Well, I think that was discussed in the April meeting, but there was certainly no recommendation made that should go forward. And I wouldn't mind it actually, but as long as somebody else pays for it, because it would cost, I don't know, 40,000-50,000 quid it would cost. The council's not really in a situation to pay for that. I don't think it'd do us much good. I think that whoever was doing the report would find that whilst the council were quite chatty about it, I think they get very limited information from government because they were quite taciturn during the process. I don't think there would be any different now, and I think we broadly know what the operators would say, so I don't think much would be learned, apart from perhaps sort out your red lines to start off with. So, I think basically I'm happy to propose the 3 recommendations. I haven't got much more to add. I think the report lays it out fairly clearly, but I'm happy to answer anything else if you've got any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit disappointed this hasn't come to scrutiny first. Is there a reason for that?
Chief Executive, I'll come in. No, I don't think it was requested to go to scrutiny. Scrutiny haven't asked to see it. It's not on the work plan. Full Council asked for a report back to Full Council. So that is what we've carried out. The recommendation in April was to bring the work plan back to Full Council in 3 months. We know we're slightly later than 3 months. The reason for that is that we deferred it from July. It was on the July agenda. The report was drafted, but we deferred it through to it was an evening meeting, and we needed to allow sufficient time for the post-16 debate, which subsequently got deferred. But at the point of planning, we didn't know that. And then it was deferred again in September because we deferred the post-16, we needed to have sufficient time for that debate. And I think if you recall back to the last meeting, we did use that full time on post-16. But there was no recommendation or no feeling to bring it back through scrutiny. It was, as I say, a recommendation to bring back to Full Council, which is what you've got before you today.
Thank you. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. One, I think paragraph 16 sums up the lessons learned and not necessarily the lessons learned, but a synopsis of what went wrong. And I think the last sentence in that about the process very much of its time, high in ambition, well-meaning intent, but not well thought through in terms of how the projects allocated funding, etc. It sounds like a very good synopsis of the sort of projects overseen. I don't want to bring politics into it, by Boris Johnson at the time. The second point is on inter-island boating. Any comments on the costs of boating between the islands? They vary significantly between the summer and the winter. £42 day trip in the summer, 122 in the winter, because of the proportionality. Any comments on that? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Nigel, you comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Watt, thank you for your comment and question. Regarding inter-island boating and the costs associated with that, I mean, that is something that is intended to be picked up in the work that's proposed here, because we recognise that is a significant challenge for the way in which the islands function, not just in terms of visitors, but also residents all year round, and that cost varies quite considerably. It is something which we are keen to bring government's attention to, because we think there's a major inequity here in terms of how inter-island boating is treated and the costs, again, that users have to pay year round. When you compare that with a similar situation on the mainland, where they have subsidised bus travel and single bus fares now are capped at £2. So technically you can take a bus from Penzance to the to the other end of Cornwall for £2. And therefore local public transport is very much more subsidised on the mainland, and there's no subsidy at all for local public transport between the islands, and we think that's a major inequity, and that's something that needs to be addressed. So it's something that out of this work we're very keen to raise with the government to see if that issue can be addressed in the future. Local authorities on the mainland are provided with the funds by central government to run that scheme, and we think that that should be applied to Council City as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
I won't touch on Highland voting as requested, so I'll keep off that subject. However, I think our transport system is currently in a major mess. We've got a major high cost to get anywhere. You know, we are 95% of our income is tourism based. On that, to fly from here to Land's End for one family is nearly the whole cost of a holiday to another location from London. So when you just factor in that, it's no wonder that we've seen a particularly poor year this year. So I think for me, it's cost of travel, the significant need of subsidy on our air route. We tried the boat route, that didn't work. Red lines were written in the sand. I really like in the report the statement of red lines. I think that's a good position to be in, where you say, both sides say what their red lines are, and then we can negotiate in a much better manner. I like that in the report. And the issues go on and on and on, but I think for me, the main ones, I say, the cost of flights, but also we are seeing significant issues in the role I pick up with CFT of people not being able to get to medical appointments significantly due to a lack of capacity on the route. I was talking to a resident only yesterday, admittedly virtually, because we all talk virtually now, we no longer talk face to face, it seems. People like to message me instead of actually knocking on my door, but there we go. She unfortunately has a chemotherapy appointment, and she's tried 4 times to get to the mainland on a day trip for a chemo appointment, and she's failed. So I think for me, it's the social benefits of people, residents, but it's also we need to make these islands much more level playing field. I hate to use the word levelling up, but that's what we need to do in terms of our flights. Level up with someone flying elsewhere in the country. Why is it you can fly to Scotland on a very, very cheap rate, whereas access to the islands is really expensive? You can fly from London, you can fly from Aberdeen to Shetland cheaper than from Land's End to Scilly, the residents, and it's not right.
Thank you very much. Chief Executive, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in there and say everything Councillor Peacock has said we would agree with. And I think one of the cornerstones of this piece of work is putting in a connectivity plan, which is greater than just trying to deal with a single part of the transport issue. I also think that we can't really take transport out of the bigger challenge that the council and the islands are going to face over the next few years, which is about sustainability, and I think transport is at the heart of that. That's a discussion we're going to have over the next few months. We're already having that discussion as part of our public meetings that we're going around on the off islands and St Mary's later this month. But I think transport is a critical part of how these islands stay sustainable. We're already beginning to see the issues which you mentioned, the issues of how expensive it is, how difficult it is to attend appointments on the mainland, the ability to get food onto the islands and keep the shelves stocked in co-op, etc. And I think, as I say, it is becoming to a point where I think this is a fundamental discussion we need to have with government going forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, thank you. Nigel, thank you for the report. It's really nice to see a timetable of reports and so we know what's coming up and what's expected. That's really good. I'm going to just go through, because obviously we're meant to be asking questions and scrutinising the reports. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions firstly about the project plan, and then about the recommendation 3 about lessons learned. So for the project plan, you've got 4 main parts of that: contingency planning, service monitoring, airport review, the connectivity plan. Firstly, so the contingency planning bit, which I used to be emergency planning officer, so I've attended the LRF a few times. So this seems to me like taking a part of that emergency planning role, that statutory role, and bringing it into that. In the email, I asked you about 3 different response levels of response. Got short-term, medium, and long-term response to an issue. And you responded by saying, this is already in the LRF risk register. But they don't, it seems to me they don't have this would be drawing up a plan. What's the difference between in the risk register and drawing up a contingency plan? What's the difference in that?
No, thank you for your question. It's a good point you raised. So firstly, I would like to reassure members that the risk in terms of major service interruptions, both passenger or freight related, for the Isles of Scilly is included in the Devon and Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Resilient Forum's risk register. So it's very much, they're very conscious of this. And if there were any incident that came about, they would respond appropriately with a multi-agency approach, likely to involve government as well. And when we talk about an incident, we're talking about something which can't be addressed by the operators effectively through their own means. So there is that response in place. What isn't in place, and what I, hence raising the requirement here for a short-term plan, is what is required is a desktop or tabletop exercise with representatives from all those agencies that would potentially be involved, just to work through how they would respond, and to actually develop the contacts and make sure that you understand who's going to perform those roles and responsibility should an incident occur. So at the moment, it's well known about, the risk is registered, you will get a response, the islands would not be cut off, but that could be improved in terms of efficiency by bringing all those representatives together and running through that as an exercise, so that if that situation does arise in the future, you know who the contacts are. And having established that, and what I say in the report is, once you've got those contacts from the relative different agencies, you've then got a basis to build on that in terms of a medium-term plan, which takes us up until, we're proposing in the report, March 26. And of course, in March 26, we're due to have our new passenger ferry, new freight vessels in service by the steamship group. And therefore, that puts us up to that period. Then beyond that, we would just want to review that responses again in the light of the new vessels coming into operation and providing improved resilience and reliability for the islands. So just to sign off and say that we are already in discussions with some of the agencies, and there's a meeting going on today with the Navy, who are across on the islands. Again, it's about making those contacts, and Mark Hewitt's meeting with our Chief Fire Officer's meeting with them today to talk through that, and it's about building up those relationships just so that they're there in the future if we need to call upon them.
Brilliant. And just making sure that so the good thing, having a local input to those discussions as well. Mark's brilliant, but he doesn't live here, so I'm sure he does with his crew, but I just want to make sure that that's in there. Sure. I'm sure it will be.
And as you picked up on, sorry to interrupt, you picked up on in our schedule of reporting, we're going to bring that work back to you, so that members can see it. And I, from my perspective, wanted to raise the profile of contingency planning, because I think it's really important. And I know, the operators deal with it on a day-to-day basis, so it's very much seen as business as usual in terms of responding to events that take place. But I think it's just making sure that we've got all those contacts in place should a major incident take place in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. Move to service monitoring, which again I think is vital to measure what we've got so we can see how it's improved. I just wanted to bring up, ask the question about commercial confidentiality. So this is just about numbers through gates, and I just want to make sure that we've got and the members got enough information to make decisions. And also, I want to just reflecting on the post-16 paper, I want to make sure it's not just day cancellations of flights. I want to make sure there's delays in there as well. John's point about chemo appointments and appointments on the mainland, if you don't get off the ground within 20 minutes of 9 o'clock for that appointment that day, you've missed it. So it's really important that we measure delays as well. Right, so I just want to make sure that that's there. The airport review, in terms of, so who's doing it? It's an independent person, independent company. Are they experienced in our unique situation? I'm just aware of the perception that's going on around Newquay Airport and the review that Cornwall Council are doing as well. And I know we're a very, very different beast to Newquay Airport, but perception is everything. So has the independent review of those people been selected? Because that's coming to December, I think. So, yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah, good point that you raise. I'll deal with the airport review first. We are currently waiting for a proposal which is due to be submitted to us this week from it's an organisation called RABA. I'm trying to just struggling at the top of my head to think what RABA stands for, but it's Regional Airports, and I'll check in a moment. They are the organisation that represents regional airports across the UK, and it is the smaller airports that they represent. St Mary's is a member of RABA, along with Newquay, so it's the smaller airports, and the Scottish airports and some in Northern Ireland. So they are the body that represents those airports. They're an independent body, but they collectively represent airports around the UK in discussions with the Department for Transport on future policy development and so on. So they have an awful lot of information that they hold from their membership on what would deem to be comparable airports elsewhere. So we've approached them and said, would you be prepared to undertake a review where you look at the costs of running our airport and the number of passengers that go through, compare that with similar airports elsewhere, and come back to us and confirm that we're running our airport as efficiently as we can. Are there any lessons that we could learn that could help reduce the cost of running our airport? Because fundamentally, we need to know that answer. As a council, we need to be confident. And I've got no problem at all with the way the airport runs at the moment. I've got nothing there that gives light that I would be concerned. And I've talked to Russ Shield about this, and he's happy that RABA undertake this review. But I think it's important publicly that we're able to say we've reviewed this and it is run as efficiently as possible, or there might be some certain small changes that can be made that might make it slightly more efficient. So we're asking them if they would put us a proposal together to do this piece of work, and then go on from that and say, okay, what are the options to this council for actually running the airport in the future, meeting all our air-related needs, but taking away the need for the council to subsidise the operation of the airport. Major challenge, because it's such small numbers going through the airport, limited ability to raise income from ground activities, which is what the larger airports do, and quite a significant fixed cost, which you get with operating an airport to maintain your CAA licence. But we're asking them, would you be prepared to do that additional piece of work as well? Again, looking at what others do who've got the similar challenge around the UK. So we're waiting for the proposal to come back from them. It's due back in from them this week, and then we will review that. And providing it meets our needs, our intention is, as we are a member of RABA, to use them. And because they are recognised by the Department for Transport, we think that would carry more weight. But that's we wait to see what we receive, and obviously that's something we're working with Russ Shield on to make sure that so the piece of work is fit for purpose and something that we can then generate a report back and bring that back to you, I think, on the 17th of December.
Okay, brilliant. In terms of the specification for the service monitoring, has that been decided yet? Has that been...
So this monitoring we started out with the principle that I wanted to make sure we collected information which was not commercially confidential. Therefore, all the monitoring that the council undertakes can be shared with you, the members, and put into the public domain, because everybody has an interest on transport and its performance, and therefore I wanted to produce a report that didn't have any commercial confidentiality, had to be considered in part 3, and so it was a public-facing monitoring process. So we are focused on putting arrangements in place to collect all the information that is regularly recorded by the ports and airport authorities. So you're right in terms of number of services, number of people using those services, cancellations and delays. All that information would come back to us, and we've put in place a process where, as efficiently as possible, we can draw the information in from those different port and airport operators, and then process that and be able to report back statistics from that around number of services, number of people, number of delays, cancellations. And alongside that, what I've also proposed in the report is that the only engagement effectively with the operators, recognising they don't want to provide us with commercial information, and I'm not going to ask them to do so, but we would give them the opportunity to provide a narrative of the services they've provided over that monitoring period. So if they've had any particular technical challenges, that they would like that commentary alongside the monitoring that we've done, then I would provide them with the opportunity to do so. I think that's only fair.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, so just the lessons learned, basically. So this is we had a discussion about this by email. It's kind of, the project was massive. It was potentially, it had been a huge paradigm shift for the islands. To distill that down to 9 paragraphs of lessons learned is a bit kind of reductive, I think. It would have been good for members maybe to have a discussion about why things, or how, why things didn't work out, but how they didn't work out. But I do take on board Councillor Sims' points about government not being willing to take part in that, and especially now there's a new government as well. Those ministers probably won't be in place, but I'm just concerned that everyone is going to be able to work together. Part of the project plan says, one of your assumptions in the project plan is that Council receives the full support where appropriate from transport operators, port and airport authorities. How are we going to measure that for support? How are we going to know the red lines are in fact red lines? Because they might change through time. And one of the main issues for me from last time was about confidentiality. It felt like at some points there was a small group running the project rather than the council. And that, again, like I said previously, perception is everything. That's how it was perceived by the public as well. So, when councillors can't express opinions based on the facts or whatever, they have to take people's words for it. This doesn't come across well. So how are we going to get around that de facto feeling of cabinet this time? How are we going to improve that next time?
Your points. I'll deal with key decisions first and the confidentiality concerns that you had. I think that was one of the things which it's been raised previously in the April meeting when I came to look at how we would take this work forward in the future. So one of the key considerations and why I've developed the work programme around the schedule of reports for full council. And you'll see that actually going that far as to put a whole programme of reporting in place from now to April 26. I was very much mindful of the comments around wanting to make sure that we kept you, the members, and the wider stakeholders, everybody in the islands has an interest in transport, so that you could see quite clearly we would be coming back regularly to report on the work we were doing. But one principle would be the same going forward as it has been in the past, in that all key decisions are taken by full council. If you look back since we submitted the bid in July 21 for the Levelling Up funding, all the key decisions have been taken by full council. That's always been the case. I've always brought reports to you in that effect. I accept that in between those meetings, discussions take place and with the operators, with the government, and there's a lot that goes on in between. That's something that I've sought to overcome this time with the way in which I've proposed the schedule for you, so there's not such long periods in between. I think you see that we're going to be regularly here talking to you about this project and the different aspects going forward. So I hope that you get sufficient reassurance from how we're proposing to go forward, that we've taken on board that comments. But as I say, the key principle of decisions related to the project will always come to full council. They always have. And I don't know, whilst I can understand periods where we're not coming to council, people take a view as to what's going on, but there's nothing that has been significant in terms of decision making, because that's what's done at full council, and it's those periods in between. But I accept that there were periods where it's quite lengthy, the gaps in between. The other thing I did have to take into account in the way we've done the work so far is some of the information that was provided to us was under non-disclosure agreements with operators and commercially confidential, and that became quite a more complicated process with Highland and Wolf started to get involved and develop proposals as well. So we had to be careful to manage that, protect the commercial confidentiality of the steamship group and the information that they provided to us and the information that we put into our business cases, and make sure that we respected that, because that was really important throughout that process. And indeed, Harlan's shared information with us on a similar basis. So we were trying to hold a neutral line through this process and make sure we respected the operator's commercial confidentiality, because it did become at certain points quite tense in terms of a rival operator coming forward. But I hope you get sufficient reassurance from the schedule that we've put in place now, because that really was one of my drivers for putting that forward as part of this plan that you have today. Taking on board that comments that were made previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Well, just regarding the confidentiality, it was a big problem throughout the whole process. And obviously I knew a considerable amount of other members, so I could come to an informed opinion, whereas other members couldn't. And I think that's your issue, isn't it? And I did try, possibly not hard enough, to pass on what information I could to other members occasionally, but I guess it's an inevitable consequence of this, but something perhaps we should be more aware of. But what I wanted to talk about, principally now, some of us received a message from John a couple of days ago, or yesterday, and it says, treat as confidential. But could I allude, is I free to allude to it? Because it's an off-island boating thing, and looking at the figures, and I have no reason to doubt them, I won't go into the figures here, it does seem to be the actual viability of running an off-island service all year round is becoming increasingly tenuous, to the point that to keep it affordable for the residents and affordable for the operator, there's an increasingly wider gap. And at some point, certainly John points out that the viability of St Agnes boating is under threat in the not too distant future. And I think that, Tresco Boats is perhaps a bit different because the wider Tresco economy can subsidise Tresco Boats, but there's no way in the world that John should be expected to subsidise St Agnes, and it's a really urgent issue.
Councillor Sims, I don't think you should be going here on this. It's too personal an issue. I think we talk about off-island boating in a wider sense.
I'll rephrase that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just.
I'll rephrase that.
And we shouldn't be discussing communications between John and yourself at this meeting because of the situation.
Okay, no, I'll rephrase that. We have a situation where the inter-island boating is under threat, certainly in the winter. And I think that's something we should be, in a way, tearing our hair out about. But yeah, I take your point.
Thank you.
Am I able?
Officer,
I don't want to press the point too much, but just because Councillor Peacock and Councillor Rogers did declare a formal interest at the beginning of the meeting in respect to this item, if you feel that you've heard appropriately from them in terms of representations, answers to questions, etc., I think it is appropriate that they do absent themselves from the chamber before you move to propose, second and vote.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel, and thank you for answering my emails. It was refreshing to get an email back. I'm just a little bit concerned about all this, and it's regrettable that there aren't other councillors here, because I do actually feel like I'm the voice of, oh God, not Anita again. But there are, blaming Boris Johnson, I've heard that twice, preempt the findings of an independent report, I've heard you say that. But also you've said it is important publicly we, review this, in a different, in different subject as now, and not the independent report. And we've been asked as councillors, as members, to make a decision on a forward planning of the most essential services on these islands, transport, without knowing what the council's role was. Your report very much says the council leading with this, but as far as I'm aware, the council are presently not really speaking to the main operator who has borrowed £30 million and invested in that long term for our service. And I'm just wondering, past events have shown that private businesses go their own way. They do their own thing. Harland and Wolff, Isle City Steamship Company. And this report and the plan is about working assumptions. Well, I was brought up is that you shouldn't work anything on assumptions, because to assume something makes an ass out of you and me. And I really don't feel comfortable about voting for something based on what you said, working assumptions. We've got a new government in place, and as yet we don't really know what they want and what they're going to offer small places like the Isles of Scilly. And that worries me, in that how can we need to have a plan, I agree, but we need to understand that we didn't succeed in getting the 48 million for this island, which would have been a massive injection into our economy. And to hear twice, let's blame Boris Johnson, I don't think is helpful. It might be that it was his fault, but we also know that you're asking for the council to lead with this project, and I don't know whether the council can work with the main operator at this moment when they don't even answer a letter that was written by the chairman of the main operator. So it to me is a mismatch. All the way through it, you go partnership, collaborative working. On the other hand, there's no evidence that that's going to happen.
Nigel, you?
Yes, Rebecca, thank you for your comments, and I can understand your concerns. When I brought the report to you in April, that report was quite detailed in the information that it provided to members in terms of bringing members up to date on what was effectively the ending of the Levelling Up project and the final decisions that were taken around that and how that came about, and the events that led up to that. So that was all brought to members in April. And in that report, I said effectively that brings to an end Council's role as leading a project to deliver new vessels funded by the government. And therefore, the Council needed to consider what its role was going forward in respect of transport, given the importance as you say, of every aspect of Ireland's life. And my recommendation to you in April was the council would need to change its position, and that you as members would need to recognise that. And I was looking for your views and support in doing so, in moving from a position of one of leading a project that would deliver new vessels. That now responsibility is now firmly sits with the steamship group, and they've made arrangements to do that. And therefore, what role does that leave the council going forward? And that role is very much one which I outlined at the meeting in April. You quite rightly said, well, let's see some more details of that and what that would entail in terms of the further work that the council would do. And this report today brings back that further work and the outline plan that members requested. I bring before you to consider. And my view is in the council, in its different role that it's now taking on, is it is around those four main areas that the council needs to focus on the work that it does. It is hampered, I believe, in representing the community, the businesses, and everybody who's got an interest in transport by the fact that it's not a transport authority. And so it doesn't have those responsibilities that a local transport authority would have on the mainland. And I think that continues to be, I think, a difficulty. You are all elected to represent the community and the businesses on the Isles of Scilly. The key thing that affects every aspect of island life is transport. And you do not have the powers and responsibilities to be able to make a difference in terms of the transport services that the islands rely on. And that is, for me, a very difficult position, because your ability to change any of the transport services that you receive, or to have any impact in the standards of the services, the frequency of the services, the costs of the services, you don't have that. Where I came from, where I was head of transport at Cornwall Council, I had the ability to do that. Not on all modes, but on key modes. And I had budgets which I do that. I had powers as a local transport authority where I could actually affect change in the services that people received. And in this role, for your council, I don't have that. And I think that's a key discussion that we need to have with the new government, because quite clearly transport is the single major challenge that you've got at the moment. It affects everything. We hear about that from all the examples we get played back. It's frequency, it's standard, it's cost, it's integration, it's reliability. Everything comes back to transport. I'm not saying it's the only issues you have to deal with, but it's a huge issue. It affects everything. And you do not have the ability, as things stand, to change that. And I think that's something that we need to have a serious discussion with government, because the future of the islands relies on it. And at the moment, those decisions on your transport system are being taken by others elsewhere. And no doubt they have the interests of the islands as one of their considerations, but it's not their only considerations, because they report to shareholders and so on. And I think it's a real challenge to find a way going forward that we find a greater role for the council, that it can actually represent the island's needs in the transport system that you require going forward. Now, this report goes as far as it can in terms of saying this is the work we can do with the powers that we've got, with the resources we've got available. But I would not hold it up as saying it is enough. But it does put you in a better position to make the case for why the council should have a greater role or a greater say in how transport is run in the future. Contingency planning is your backstop position. You must have that in place in terms of covering off any eventuality about services being interrupted. So this monitoring, collecting the data on a daily basis and collating all that is really important in making cases in the future for why transport needs to be improved, or actually challenging operators to do better. Reviewing our airport is the only aspect of the transport service that comes under direct control of the council. So we need to make sure it's run efficiently, and we can no longer afford to go on as I understand it from the council's budget position, of subsidising that to the level that's required. So we need to look at ways in which, again, we can maintain the airport but fund it in a different way. And then finally, the connectivity plan. That is effectively the transport plan for the Isles of Scilly. All local transport authorities across the countries are required by government to maintain an up-to-date transport plan. We are not under that requirement because we are not a transport authority. But we need to put a transport plan in place to set out the transport system that we would want, looking at examples elsewhere, and then be using that to hold operators to account and saying, well, this is the system we want, how far can you go in providing this commercially? And then having discussions with government and saying, well, what's the shortfall? What do you, government, need to do in the future? So that's the thinking behind the plan that I've put in place. As you quite rightly point out, does it go far enough in terms of the challenge we've got at the moment? No, it doesn't in a single step. But I think putting these foundations in place will help us get to where ideally I'd like to see the council, which is having ability to influence the transport services that it receives on behalf of the communities and businesses on the islands.
It's very helpful, Nigel, and you really do give good replies and very thoughtful. But I've got to go back to my original point. Past events show that private businesses will go their own way regardless of the council. And your answer was very detailed, and they always are. They're always good answers, but you didn't answer that. Because that does impact on whatever you write and whatever we do. You know, the Ardsley Steamship went ahead and borrowed £30 million. They've invested long term, and that will impact on everyone on this island, their decision.
It will have a major impact. As I said in my previous response, decisions are being taken, transport for the Isles of Scilly, but they're not being taken here.
Yeah, and I don't know how this report and what you plan can help resolve that. I get what you're saying totally. I also understand what you're saying about a council having a role as almost a transport authority. That will have to go out to consultation. It's not something that the members alone can decide. It has to go out to consultation. And that would be a very interesting consultation, I think, with the community. But how do you want your transport system on this island run? That's missing from your report. You know, what do the community want? Do they want the council to be that transport operator and have that overall, almost, sight of everything that's going on regarding transport, whether it's off islands, whether it's medical flights or what? The only other thing I must take issue with you on is you said all key decisions were taken by full council. Because I was one of the members that were concerned that I thought there was a little group that were making all the decisions. The actual full business case that went to the government for levelling up was not put to full council. And when I asked Paul Masters about that, he agreed. So all key decisions weren't taken by full council, were they?
I'd have to go back and check that, because my understanding is that the business case was approved by...
The full business case was amended, and it was not shared with the partners and shared with full council. And I remember asking Paul Masters about that when we had the meeting on it, and he agreed. The full business case did not go back to full council. But it would be helpful if you actually looked into that, because maybe my recall is not as good as it used to be. But bottom line is, yes, we do need a project plan, and there's some really good stuff in here, especially about the airport. But I have concerns I just think it's quite weak. It could have been far more braver, far more challenging. It's almost same old, lot of repetitiveness about it. And, I just think it was an opportunity after not getting that 48 million, which would have been fantastic for this community. It's such a big loss. I felt something needed to be a bit braver for our community, and maybe we should be consulting the community more. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Nigel, did you want to come back? But briefly, if you can, please, we've got other councillors waiting to come in.
Sure thing. I take your point about being braver. I think that there is an issue here around timing. I mean, we developed this report and this plan to come to you in July. In between time, the general election took place, and we're still to have discussions with ministers around the direction of travel that this new government wants to take, in particularly in respect of Ailsa Scilly. So this report doesn't benefit from that input and the government's response to the challenges that we have. We spent a lot of time talking to the previous government over the challenges that we had, and particularly around the project that we were leading, the Levelling Up. We now need to recommence those discussions with the new government, the new ministers, with the challenges that we've got. This report doesn't incorporate that because those discussions are still about to take place. And therefore I accept that we could be braver, but I think that we're waiting to see what the government's response is to the challenges that we have before we can take that forward. So it is a not as challenging or as brave a report as perhaps you'd like to receive at this point. I accept that point. But I think that's something that will only come when we get into further discussions with the government to see. I mean, now, a couple of the messages coming out of government so far in relation to transport, and something which are points of encouragement, are their approach to public transport and greater intervention of the public sector in the provision of public transport services, recognising that in the past the needs of the users have not been properly recognised in the provision of particularly local bus services and indeed the rail network. And so they've already signalled that in the King's speech that there's going to be legislation coming forward. Now again, that affects the mainland and not the Ailsa Scilly. How would you take that philosophy and apply it to the Ailsa Scilly? I think is a key question of this government. Because again, it comes back to what I said earlier about this council doesn't have an ability to actually influence transport services that are fundamental to the life on the islands. And therefore, if this government is committed to going in that direction, what does that mean to the Ailsa Scilly? I think that's the key question. The discussion needs to be had. It couldn't be put in this plan at this point, but I accept it's somewhere where we may have to adapt this going forward once we know and get into those conversations. Because I think it's a key discussion that needs to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Legg, please.
Thank you for the report, and I think it was mentioned earlier, it's really nice to see a timetable of reports that we can expect. I think for me, the Islands Connectivity Plan is the big one. I'd just like to ask, I mean, the period is set out for 26 to 2030. Just thinking sort of perhaps longer term than that, there is a need to decarbonise, and transport is a large polluter, and I wondered whether it was within the scope of that report or perhaps another report to consider the longer term strategic need to decarbonise.
Smiley, it's a really good point you raised, because when I originally drafted this, I had the period running to 2050, recognising that very point around the need to plot a way all the way through to achieving net zero. I then reflected on that, and there's a lot of reports produced in my industry that have long time horizons, and people look at it and go, oh, that's interesting, that's going to be looking to 2050, and that's not that far away, but it's still a long way ahead. And I thought, I came to the view, rightly or wrongly, that I wanted to focus this government on what they needed to do to improve transport for the Ailsa Scilly. So I brought the time horizon back to 2030 and said, okay, this is the life of this next government. This plan's going to look at what needs to be done over that period. They can quite clearly see what needs to be done during their term of office, decisions that they need to commit to, funding that undoubtedly they're going to need to provide, support the transport services that we need. And so I brought a tighter time horizon in. I think the report will still include something that looks beyond that, but I wanted to have a more focused horizon. And when it lands on the Secretary of State's desk, she looks at that and says, okay, this is in my term of office. What are they proposing? What do they want? What do we need to do here to support them? rather than it's to 2050, and that's very interesting, isn't it? So it was very much around positioning. I just felt that it was important that we sent the message. This is what we want you to do in your term of office to support our transport system.
Thank you.
Absolutely, I think that's fair enough. Does the connectivity plan? I mean, it talks about transport and sort of the islands, and we've discussed the inter-island, the importance of inter-island transport. Will it also cover sort of personal transport on St Mary's as well as we've discussed earlier? Sort of traffic in Hewtown and the number of cars and parking is an issue. Is that within this scope, or is that something else? And is that something for the council to consider more broadly, or could that be another area for this process to consider?
I gave the commitment that we were in the papers that we would bring back a scope of what this plan would have. So I think that's a good point that you make, and one which we can look at that when we bring that back. My initial response is to focus on the main transport services that we rely on between the mainland and the Isles and inter-island transport. But we can, if members are so minded, extend that to actually movement on the individual islands themselves, and make it a comprehensive plan, as is the case for local transport authorities on the mainland with a local transport plan.
I mean, personally, I would think for the November meeting, it would be best to be focused and perhaps not look into that, but perhaps it's something else that we could consider at another time.
Okay, I take that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
If I can just briefly come back on Councillor Bedford's comment about operators not engaging. Just check with the monitoring officer. Am I okay to quote a report that's in the public domain from the Steamship Company?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to read directly from their AGM report for this year. They state that aviation as a whole made a loss of 0.2 of a million, and I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm not going to read it all out, is paraphrasing for a loss of 0.58 of a million this year. And I quote, they then go on to blame partly us for the council putting up the cost of fares, the cost of landing fees, 18%, which they obviously hadn't budgeted for. However, moving on, they say, whatever the reasons, the losses are not acceptable for an aviation business turning over £10.5 million and utilising a net book value of 9.6 million of assets. We urgently need to find a solution and are looking at every option to eradicate ourselves from the situation. We recognise the lifeline that Skybus provides to the community and are determined to find a way to make it work. So, with that very statement in their annual report, one would hope engaging with the Council of the Isles of Scilly would be a very good way of making that work.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Sims, please.
Yes, quickly.
Briefly, please.
Airport, I think I'm correct in making the point that airport numbers are disappointing again this year. So John's point that he just made is becoming increasingly urgent. And something I did miss out earlier on when we talked about the red lines, I think at some point we will be entering into negotiations with operators and government. I think that we need to make clear at the point that everybody has to accept that the government is likely to have some sort of public procurement issues involved in this, and there quite possibly could be a level of regulation coming in. And I think that before we enter into negotiations with anybody, that all parties need to accept that that's a possibility.
Thank you. So we have recommendations in front of you for this report. Do I have a proposer for the adoption? Councillor Sims, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Legg. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And Nigel, thank you very much for your report. And we look forward to our workshop following this meeting. Thank you. Allow the councillors in. Thank you. Right, we move swiftly on to item 7 on our agenda, which is the redevelopment of Park House, which is in the hands of Nicola on screen. Good morning, Nicola, and thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Thank you. Just a short report, really, just exploring the opportunities we've now got for Park House. So with the new health and social care facility underway at the hospital, and Park House due to be relocated next year, we now need to explore the opportunity of the reuse of Park House itself. It will help meet the housing needs of staff potentially working in the care sector, and that suggestion was part of the integrated business case discussed last year. We've already made a commitment for the redevelopment being explored for staff accommodation. So the purpose of this report really is to explore what that residential use might look like and how it might be delivered. And it asks you as members to identify the preferred option in terms of a scheme layout, because there are a number of options available. We've got a clear need for housing, be that general need or sector need, and that need for the sector, at least the health and social care sector, is partially met within the private rented sector and on site at the hospital itself currently. So if you look at the need, and it's set out in the report, from the health and social care sector, it's primarily long-term accommodation. So we're seeking to provide secure accommodation for staff to reduce the amount of agency staff being used and to therefore reduce costs and to make it a more attractive proposition for people to take employment at the facility. There's also a short-term need for those employees visiting the islands to support service delivery. So the process that we're going through in understanding that need and developing a business case is to look at the tenure, the size of units, how the site might be managed, how the delivery might be funded, what those costs might be, and any potential rental income as we move forward. So we've developed some scheme options. And there's 3 in the paper. I'm really sorry, they've reproduced quite badly, I'm afraid. But if I describe them to you, we've sought to mix the different types of accommodation that could be provided on that, what is quite a tight site at Park House, within the existing envelope of the building. And 3 options have been developed in the paper. One focuses entirely on self-contained units, so that option 1 is 5 self-contained units. The other extreme takes the balance the other way and provides just 5 ensuite rooms and just 3 self-contained units. And the middle ground, if you like, that most closely reflects current need is the option 2, which is 4 self-contained flats and 4 ensuite rooms that seem to meet both the council and health sector needs as understood at this point in time. Each option has got its advantages and disadvantages, and a key point to note really is that it's only the self-contained units really that will be able to seek external Homes England funding for. So that's a key consideration, because in terms of deliverability, there are limited funding options available to us, and whilst even with Homes England support, it will need council to invest in the project too. And that's why we need to do a significant amount of work on the business case, taking into account the likely income, but also bearing in mind that the rental levels need to be affordable for those who would be occupying the property. So there's quite a significant amount of further due diligence to do, and we need to develop the business case, the financial case, and look at all the funding options and the impact, how that might impact on the mixture of tenure and units. So the proposal at this stage is we take it forward as a council, but look to work in partnership if we can with the health sector, certainly taking into account what their needs are, potentially looking at whether they can provide funding too. The recommendations are set out on page 91, and there are 4. One's really just to confirm what we've already stated previously in the business case for the integrated care project, which is our preferred option for the reuse of the site as staff accommodation. The second looks at the preferred option for the site layout. So of those options 1, 2 and 3, my recommendation to you is to take option 2 forward, because it best meets current need. But we will then need to do further due diligence and develop a business case. Once that's done, recommendation 3 kicks in when we're further down the line and we know we've got a viable scheme, that we put a plan application together that can be costed up, and then finally that we bring that financial business case back to council to make sure that we've got funding to deliver the scheme. So it's really the next step in the process, this. So we've got an opportunity, we've done some concept drawings, now we need to delve a little bit deeper into how that might be delivered. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for this report, Nicola, and the options. It's a difficult one because I'm not so sure that staff like the shared facilities. If this was to go to either staff up at the integrated health project, you get 5 flats out of option 1, so I'm torn between the 2 at the moment. I'd like to hear other people's views on this. Also, looking ahead, the back bit of Park House, which I believe has got 8 bed sits, am I right? When Live West is up and running, would it be a possibility to move the people who are in those single accommodations up there and make that the back bit of Park House could also be turned into more flats? They are very small rooms and they're not ideal, I don't think, for people to be living in. Like other people's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
I don't really have excuse me.
Sorry, just one sec. Did you want to come back, Nicola, on that?
I'll make a list, don't worry, I can come back at the end.
Councillor Williams, sorry.
Excuse me. I don't have an issue with the broader concept of redeveloping additional housing within the building. But my point was just going to be, Nicola, if we face a period of time when the building is empty, sat there doing nothing, I'd really like to make a case for a temporary, medium-term location for young people to have as a space. I regularly have conversations with them about some sort of area they can have as a youth hub, which is dedicated to them, so they're not sharing it and having to have a compromised space. So I'd really like us to give thought in the longer term to how the council can provide a space for young people, and in the short term whether this could be something. If we're waiting on funding for a year or 2 or 3 rather than it sitting empty, I think we could really do something positive with it.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I never cease to be amazed how architects do this. So it'd be a Rubik's Cube from my perspective. But anyway, I'm happy to propose the options, and despite Apple's misgivings, I tend to prefer option 2 because I think we're still going to have a situation with agency staff, and having the 4 separate bed spaces at the Park House would be obviously extremely useful in that, and to reduce costs regarding accommodation elsewhere. So I'm happy to propose the recommendations and go with option 2. So I can see option 1 is compelling.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to second option 2 because it seems to me it gives more flexibility. Perhaps the officer would like to confirm. But I was just wondering if it would take too much time just to give as well as fully looking at option 2, to give a little bit more costing with option 1 and option 3, so that when option 2 came back for further discussion, we would have a broad brush on the differential costs of both option 1 and option 3, but not if it would take a great deal of time and energy.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't want to see anything ruled out at the moment, especially if we're going for funding, because then we just have to come and change it later on. My comment about Councillor Williams mentions about waiting for funding. This needs to be done pretty quickly if we're going to staff the integrated hub as well. So in lieu of that, recommendation 2, can we have a date on that, please? So we've got a deadline for you, because I know you love deadlines, Nicola. But apart from that, I'd like to just keep our options open really, because things change and funding opportunity changes as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Roger, please.
Just briefly, is it the intention that this accommodation would be ring fenced for council employees or available on the open market, rental wise?
Shall I start coming back with some of the answers to the questions then? So in terms of ring fencing, the recommendation one is that it be used for sites for staff accommodation. Now, it's an integrated care facility. So the whole idea of the integrated workforce, it would be those who are currently employed by the council, but also by the health sector. So it would be the preference here is for staff accommodation for the integrated care facility or wider adult social care. So it would be in effect ring fence for that. Now, looking at the housing needs that are set out in the report, my worry is that what happens if they don't need them, and is there a need for these units within the wider housing needs sector? And you'll see that there's massive demand for 1 and 2 bedroom units. So I'm confident that we can ring fence them initially, but there is a massive need, a wider need that would be met as required if we couldn't rent them out for that sector alone. But I'm pretty confident the needs are there. Working backwards from the questions so far, I think Dan makes a point about in the business case, will the other options be tested? I think inevitably as you develop a preferred option, you'll have to be flexible about what those funding opportunities are, what that need might be, how that might be met in terms of reality. So I would have thought options 1 and 2 in effect will be explored more thoroughly in that business case. Option 3, I think, presents some challenges because, as you say, has already been stated, some of the existing facility, the 4-bedroom spaces up at the hospital, are not liked by employees. They aren't en suite at the moment. If you look at the floor plan there, and it's all shared facilities. So we've tried to address some of those issues. But it's really about they would serve the need for those people staying 1 or 2 nights only. The main purpose of the report is to try and explore how we address those who are perhaps agency or on short-term contracts and how we encourage them to stay on island in the longer term. So those self-contained units are the most important element in my mind of what could be achieved on site. So I think options 1 and 2, there's advantages and disadvantages of both. In bringing option 2 forward, it was listening to the health sector, and it was that sector, the CFT, Cornwall Foundation Trust and the NHS were asking that we had that flexibility in terms of the use of that upper floor. So that's one of the reasons why we brought in those bedroom spaces, but with ensuite facilities on the first floor. In terms of Joel's question around the youth hub, I think if there is an element of a gap, if you like, a temporary use could quite easily go in there. And I'm thinking about the lounge area on the ground floor would probably give a useful space for the youth hub to use. So absolutely would take that on board. And if there were an opportunity to use that in the short term, I think that would make the utmost sense. I think the other question that Avril raised was around the back of Park House and whether there was an opportunity to redevelop that at some stage. I think I'm taking one step at a time here. This is phase 1. I think once we get on site with Con Thomas and we look at who's in our accommodation, what that transfer list looks like and what our future housing needs might look like, we need to look at the whole of our estate, including those bed sits, to see are they still suitable and fit for purpose, or do we need to redevelopment? But I see that very much as a next stage in our housing delivery programme. I think I've covered off most of the questions. Remind me if there's anything else that I've missed.
I think that's all good. Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Sims.
Just quickly. My assumption when I proposed the recommendations was that the option 2 is not actually set in stone, because it does say to be deferred and developed. So I think that we still have options open. This is just the one we're going to look at more forensically.
Thank you. Councillor Mark.
Could we just have a date for recommendation 2, please?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, we've engaged a consultant who's working alongside the delivery team, and we expect to have that business case prepared at the end of this year, early next. So I think that January Council would be the ideal opportunity.
I'll propose that amendment to the recommendation to be presented back in January.
So we have a proposed amendment. Sorry, Leah, did you want to come in?
I just think that amendment probably sits better in recommendation 4.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is somebody going to second that, that amendment?
So is there a seconder, please? Councillor Peacock, thank you. So we have 4 recommendations that this is concluded by January. So we have a proposer, and we have a seconder. Sorry, Councillor Mumford, did you want to come in?
Sorry, is it possible to keep option 1 open as well as looking into option 2?
I think that is being kept.
That is right, is it?
Yes, we're just focusing on option 2.
Yeah.
But nothing is being decided at this juncture. Is that right, Nicola? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Leah.
Sorry, Chair. In respect of recommendation 2, just because of the way it's currently drafted, is it preferable for, now members have actually considered the options, for it to read that members prefer option 2 to be further developed and appropriate due diligence undertaken?
Yes, I think that was the proposal. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So to be clear, in recommendation 2, the preferred option in that recommendation is option 2, but we are still considering options 1 and 3. Is that right, Nicola?
I'm certainly hearing options 1 and 2. I've not heard option 3.
I'll say option 3.
I thought.
Okay, all options are still in the mix. Okay, no problem.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder. All those in favour of the recommendation, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Nicola, for your report.
Thank you.
We move on to the last item on our agenda, but not least, item 8, which is the Customer Services Charter in the hands of Jo. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. So the Council of Ears Scilly, through its corporate plan, has committed to the following objectives: to make it simple for our customers to find out who to contact and when they're available, to ensure that our workforce is able to provide face-to-face or over-the-phone customer service where appropriate, to make the Council's website easier for everyone to use and enable customers to book and pay for services online, and to always provide excellent customer service. This report presents to members a new Customer Services Charter and Action Plan that adopts a whole organisation approach to achieving these objectives. I've taken care to ensure that the balance between online and face-to-face customer service is considered, as maintaining face-to-face service was emphasised as important to residents during the corporate plan consultation. Members are asked to approve the recommendation to adopt the Customer Services Charter as set out in the appendix attached to this report. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jo. Any questions for Jo, please? Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, the old town hall on the side used to have quite a large notice board, and it always had quite a lot of information for the community, including all the planning applications, which was really well used. And it's difficult because this building is a listed building, but I'm just wondering if we could think about the reinstatement of a notice board with important community information on, while we're looking at other forms of communication like the website, because not everybody is computer literate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I love the action plan. Very laudable ambitions within that, and they're all achievable. But I still think a lot of them are quite difficult. For instance, there's one bullet point that says ensure staff are familiar with the council's communications handbook. Well, my admittedly anecdotal knowledge is that they're not. Although all of the second list way to achieve the ambitions are all achievable, and I wish the staff every success.
Thank you. Councillor Legg, please.
The Vice Chair mentioned the importance of communicating by old-fashioned means, if you like, not just online. And I'd just like to stress the importance that happens on off islands as well.
Good point. Thank you very much. Councillor Watt, were you proposing the adoption of the recommendation?
Yes, I will, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. And a seconder, please, Councillor Sims. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you, Joe, for all your work. Thank you. With that, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much indeed.